Have a seat. I don't know how y'all grew up, but let me just give you some insight into how I grew up. So we like to play, we called it war. I don't know if that's insensitive. We shouldn't have been playing war. But man, if I could get a hold of a gun, like a Nerf gun, then it's game on. I mean, I had some of them old revolvers, like we were going to play an old Western. Somebody else would be sheriff, have me a badge. And we would go to, like, whether it was Power Rangers, we were playing Power Rangers and we were going to war, or we were playing Army Men, we were going to war, or playing Cops and Robbers, whatever it was, man, there was something, and we were going at it. It's going to be us against them, whoever the them was. Sometimes it was me against my little brother, or me against my little cousins and my little brother. And then I would take my littlest cousin, and it'd be the two of us against them. We would whip their tail every time, right? Because we're smarter and we were stronger, and that's how I grew up. In the woods, I mean, we were out there with some sticks, and so if we couldn't afford a saucy little Nerf gun, which was most of the time, then we got a stick with a little handle on it, right? And I was ready to go. I'd watch some movies, and so I knew how to make a bunker. You just get a shovel and dig a hole until your body fits in it. At that time, I was nowhere near the size of a grown man I am today, and so it was a tiny hole. And so you know what I'm talking about? And at night, you went to bed just thinking about the fun you were going to have the next day with all the little traps that you made. You know what I'm talking about? You like dig a hole and like put some leaves on top of it or a branch on top of it, hope that your enemy stepped in it. You know what I'm talking about? Well, there's this one particular friend who had this enormous backyard. At least at the time I was 10 or 11, it seemed enormous. I actually don't know how big it was. Nevertheless, it was covered up. Just fully grown everywhere. And so it was pretty much a useless space until his dad took a bush hog. Right? His dad took a bush hog to it. I'm going to stay on this side because I think I'm ringing on that side. His dad took a bush hog to it, and he cut some paths all throughout this big, enormous expanse of a space, right? And all of a sudden, it became a pretty saucy little spot. So then we said, hey, you know what? We got to set this up where we have an advantage, like a home field advantage. And so we got some little trap door type areas where we'd build some doors like out of vines and thorns, and we make this door and we put it in front of this little door that he had cut through with the little machete. And so you didn't even know the door was there until it was your turn to go, and you get in. It was so cool. Well, we set this one particular trap where if you came around the corner too fast and you were chasing us, there's a little false door, but we put this wire up. I don't know where we found a wire at. We found this wire, and then we put thorns all over it. And so if you were chasing us 100 miles an hour coming around the corner, we would disappear in the door, and you would run right into the wire, right? Well, it never actually worked. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why it didn't work, but maybe it's because no one runs 100 miles an hour, and you can see it before it happens. You're like, man, I'm not going to run into that wall of briars. But in our mind, it was the most amazing plan. I remember I would spend hours and hours outside, and I would get cut up and bruised. You know what I'm talking about when you're going through the briars and you get like a cut on your shin and you're bleeding, but you don't even know you got cut. And so when all of a sudden someone sees you, like, oh man, what happened? You're like, oh, I didn't even know I was bleeding. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of thing. Like that's what's happening. I got stuff all over, scratches. It never failed though. I'd get done playing outside and I'd walk back inside, and someone more responsible than I, someone with a little more wisdom, a little more knowledge, would always look at me and say, hey, you need to get that cleaned up. Because if you don't, it's gonna get infected. And I'd look at it like, no, that's just a scratch. I rub some dirt on that, soak that blood up, and we're good to go. Know what I mean? Now, Clint, you better pay some attention to that, or it's going to get infected. At the end of the day, the truth is, wounds require attention. Wounds require attention. And that's the truth. I'd like to say that I grew out of me neglecting wounds. I'd like to say that it was just something that happened when I was 9 and 10, running around in my backyard or some friend's backyard. But it ain't the truth either. Truth is, there are many times where I still got to have somebody older and wiser than me take a look and say, hey, I know you just want to rub some dirt on it and move on. But wounds require attention. When we ask the question, who is Jesus? We begin to take a look throughout the Bible. Specifically, there's 4 books in particular that really chronicle a good piece of Jesus' life and the ministry that he did. And as we start to take a look in those books, we find a couple of themes that are recurring. Over and over again, you would find Jesus in situations where he found a group of individuals and he would look at them and they would have an issue, whether it was leprosy or whether it was blindness or they couldn't walk or they were paralyzed, whatever it was. And he would step into their life and he would make something magical, miraculous, mystical happen. We called them miracles. Right? And so he would step into their life and he would make that happen. Or there would be other people who Jesus didn't find on his own, but they came to Jesus. There's a group of friends who had another friend who was paralyzed. And so they carried their friend on a mat. And when they got to Jesus, Jesus was already booked. And it was just full of people, and they couldn't even get into the house where Jesus was. And so they went and they got on the roof, and they started to dig through the top of the roof, and eventually they made a hole in the roof, and they lowered their friend down to Jesus there. And so it's not just that Jesus went and found people in need of a miracle. It also was that people were searching out Jesus who were in need of a miracle. And sometimes people didn't even need to get in front of Jesus, like coming through the roof. There was this one particular moment where this lady she said, you know what, my faith is so and he's so good. My faith is so big and he is so good. I don't even need him to acknowledge that I exist. All I need to do is touch the jacket he's wearing. If I can just touch the jacket he's wearing, I know I'll be okay. And so she fights her way through a crowd and she reaches out and grabs it, and sure enough, healing happens. There's moments Jesus doesn't even have to have someone that he finds. There's moments where Jesus doesn't have to have someone brought to him or someone just want to reach out and touch him. There's moments that Jesus finds himself bringing a miraculous healing to people that he's not even in the same room with. Where he's got a daughter or someone's daughter or someone's servant, and he just simply speaks the word, and they're healed. This recurring theme, Jesus is a healer. But there's one particular instance that I think resonates with me as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a man, as a part of the community, as a human being, more than the rest. And it's because I see so much of my own issues in this one guy. I'll share his story with you. It's one of those times Jesus is in this city called Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the epicenter for the Jewish religion. It's where the temple is, and that's the heart and soul of the Jewish religion. And Jesus is a Jew in very good standing. He's a teacher. He goes. He is a part of the customs to be a good Jew, a Jewish man. And so he's there, and for one of these, probably one of the big 3 festivals, there'd be 3 each year, just enormous, and everyone would come, and it doesn't say which festival. He's there for a festival, and so most likely it's one of the bigger ones, and Jesus is there, so the place is filled, right? There's lots of people, lots of folks are here, and there's this one particular part of the city where there's this pool, and in this pool, every once in a while, it would kind of start to bubble a bit. And so there were some folks that thought, hey, you know what? When it begins to bubble, that's got to be something miraculous. The first person in the pool would be healed of what they got going on. And so this crowd of folks that were broken and had some issues, whether it was they were paralyzed or they had something that was harmed to them, or they were born with it, or it happened to them because of an accident or a bad decision or whatever it is, just run the gamut of, hey, this is something I want to be healed of. It's a physical issue. And I'm going to stick around this pool. When it starts to bubble, I got to be the first one in. And so Jesus is walking around that particular area, and he happens to see this guy laying down on a mat. And he kind of looks at him, and he's like taking a look. He says, okay, cool. And they have a little bit of a conversation, and he discovers that this guy has been laying there in this condition around this pool for 38 years. 38 years. This guy's been disabled, unable to walk, unable to do anything for himself, and he's been lying there on the mat trying to get in this pool. Now, 38 years is a long time. I know it's a long time because I'm 37, right? And so I'll be 38 in December 29th, if you want to put that in your calendar. By the way, if you're giving me a Christmas present, I want a separate birthday present. That's the way it works. Don't be combining the presents. Any other people out here born in December? That's what I'm talking about. Say amen. Amen, come on. That's beside the point, but I just want to point that out. December 29th, separate present. Okay. You're laughing like I'm not serious, but we're serious, ain't we? We are serious. We are serious. I'm smiling because I think it's rude, to not smile, but it is what it is. 38 years. It's a long time. And so Jesus, he walks over to this guy, and having a conversation, and he just asks him, do you want to get well? Let me read you. It's in the book of John, chapter 5, and that's what Jesus says. Do you want to get well? And I'm thinking, Jesus, that's the dumbest question you've ever asked. This man's been sitting beside this pool trying to get well for 38 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a long time, Jesus. And your question to him is, let me double check. No, it still says it here. Do you want to get well? And the guy responds. He says, well, the problem is I can't get into that pool fast enough. I want to get into the pool, but ain't nobody here to help me. And so every time the pool bubbles, somebody else jumps. I ain't got nobody. Somebody else gets in before me. So now I can't get in. And then Jesus looks at this man, and he says, get up. Pick up your mat and walk. Stare straight at him. Looks through 38 years of disappointment and says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And so the man got up and rolled up his mat, put it under his arm, and he walked. Now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, well, that seems like all the other stories. Jesus finds someone finds Jesus, someone reaches out. They got an issue. Jesus got a solution for the issue. Happy ending. Well, that's true. But let me start with this statement. And this is where it begins to resonate with me personally. 38 years is a long time to sit with a wound only feet away from your perceived healing. You see, I identify a number of issues with this guy. Issues that I want to admit in front of you, I will admit in front of you, I've got. And I want to go out on a limb and say, maybe I'm not the only one. First issue I see, it's in just the words Jesus used. I think Jesus is pretty intentional about the words he uses. And so if he decides to ask a question, there's some purpose behind that question. And so when I go to the words of Jesus and he just simply says, do you want to be made well? Well, let me make sure I read it right again. Do you want to get well? Are Jesus' words. And again, I'm thinking, Jesus, hold on, bad question. Of course he wants to get well. But he's asking him a question for a reason. He said, hey, partner, do you actually want to get well? And I'm trying to think in my mind, what if he was hesitant? I mean, because after all, there's a lot of evidence, 38 years worth, that maybe he doesn't want to get well. And why is that? The first thing that comes to mind is maybe it's the fear of the unknown. Maybe it's, I'm not really sure what happens after I get well. Like, I don't know what's next because I've got 38 years of history, me and this Matt and all these folks that are sitting here and this bubbling water that I'm always not first in. I'm not sure what he's in. I don't know if he's third place. I don't know if he gives up when the first person gets in. But he's just like, hey, I got 38 years of known, and now you're asking me, do I want to be made well? And I don't know if I do, actually. Because if I was made well, what would I do? I don't know what I would do. I don't have a trade. I don't have anything to contribute right now. I've got nothing to give. If anything, in my unwellness, in my brokenness, in this moment, at least I'm someone's project. At least that's what I can contribute. I help someone else feel better about themselves. Because after all, the man's been there for 38 years. Somebody's giving him food, right? Somebody's feeding him. Somebody's giving him some clothes. I mean, he grows. You go over time, right? That's what I keep telling myself. You grow over time, This man's growing. And so he ain't wearing the same clothes he was wearing 38 years ago. And so somebody's stepping in. If anything, he's thinking, well, at least I contribute to someone else feeling better about themselves when they take care of me. That's at least a known. I don't know what I would do if I was made well. I don't even know where I'd begin if I was made well. And suddenly I'm thinking, Jesus, that's a really good question. Because what I do know about my condition is that it's my condition. So whatever hurt I've got in my life, whatever hurt maybe you have in your life, whatever brokenness exists in our lives, at least it's ours. And so somebody comes around and says, hey, would you like to be made well of that hurt, whatever fill in the blank that is? And you're like, I don't know. Because maybe I'm now enjoying at least the attention that I get when I'm not well. At least somebody does come and bring me some food every once in a while. If I was made well, would they still show up to give me food? At least somebody does provide some clothing for me. Would they still show up? And all of a sudden, our unwellness becomes our norm. Listen to this. Becomes where we're most comfortable. We've gotten used to our brokenness. And so when Jesus asks us, hey, you want to be made well? Maybe it's not as dumb a question as we thought. That's not the only thing I see in this man that I've seen in myself. This guy's got a plan that he knows will not work. For 38 years, he's been hanging out, knowing he's got no one to put him in. Yet, here's the deal. What we can find from really looking into the text is that he's got space for him and Jesus to have a conversation. And he's got to be far enough away from the pool that someone would have to put him in. So it's not like he's moved his mat. Let's pretend the edge of the stage is the water. It's not like he's moved his mat or gotten someone over 38 years as they pass by to move him so close to the water. So when it does start to boil, just in case this little superstitious thing they got going on actually works, that he could just roll in. Like he hadn't even done that. He's still way over here looking at everybody else who doesn't have leg issues that can jump in the pool for him, and all he's saying is, well, ain't nobody going to put me in there before they put them in there. So he's been working a plan he knows not going to work. Man, I got to identify that hardcore. I got an issue. And so to make myself feel better and to allow the conversations to be a little bit easier with the people that also know I have this issue, I've created a plan. So that at least I can have a conversation. I'm going to work this plan, and this plan right here. But in my mind, I already know this plan ain't going to work. But it makes me feel better about the conversations I got to have, because at least I got a plan. You ever feel that way? You ever get caught up and, hey, I know I got my issue, and you just throw something together just because you know the people who care most about you are going to ask you some tough questions, and you know you got to have an answer? The no answer is not acceptable. So instead, your plan is to stay far enough away from healing that you know you'll never get it. But at least it looks like you're trying. That's been me so many times. Third issue, and this is probably the one that's most difficult. He has nobody. Jesus asks him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." So not only is this man sitting in a pile of brokenness for 38 years, now he's sitting in a pile of loneliness. And his brokenness is what's created the loneliness. And now he just sits in it. He's convinced he's got nobody. Yet again, he's missing. Somebody's bringing him food. Somebody's putting clothes on his back. But when he takes a look at his world, he's got no one. And so he sits with his brokenness, surrounded by his loneliness, and he can't see a way out. You ever felt like that? You feel like that now? But then Jesus, he sees this broken man from across the room. And here's the cool thing. Jesus sees the broken man before the broken man sees him. In other words, Jesus is present before the broken man even recognizes who Jesus is. Jesus is in the room with the guy long before the guy ever recognizes Jesus is in the room. If that's you at the moment, maybe you see where we're about to go. In the midst of your brokenness and loneliness, in the midst of your issues, in the midst of the things that you're like, hey, maybe I want to get well, or maybe I don't. Maybe I like the attention. Maybe I like what's known. All of those things, I'm just giving you a heads up. Even if you haven't acknowledged that Jesus is a real person, that you're still thinking in the mindset of Jesus was, because history says for sure Jesus was. Lots of people, even people who are not Jesus followers or Bible enthusiasts, say Jesus was. Jesus was a man. Jesus was put on a cross by the Romans. Jesus certainly was. And if you hadn't made the leap from Jesus was to Jesus is, even in this minute, I'm telling you, Jesus is in a room with you. And Jesus is looking across the room, and he sees you in your brokenness, surrounded by loneliness. And he's already seen it. And he's already seen you. And I'd even go a step further than that and say he's already starting to walk towards you in this very moment. And Jesus starts walking towards him. And sure enough, as Jesus gets over to him, he says, you know what, I'm going to initiate this relationship. I'm going to get it started. He helps the man self-identify with a simple question. Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? He asks. Jesus saw not only the brokenness, but he saw all of the reasons why he might answer that question in anything other than, yes, sir, I do. But he wanted to help the guy self-discover. He wanted to ask the question, hey, you know what? Let's really take a dive. Let's really take a look in here. Let me ask you a question that's going to get you thinking. Because I think everyone else that sees people around this pool that hang out here day after day, year after year, now decade after decade, everyone else just walks by in these festivals and they look over there and they say, look at all them people. They want to get healed, but only one can do it at a time. And we're not even sure if that works, but they do want to get healed. And Jesus walks into the middle of them to the guy who's likely been there probably at least top 10, the longest, and looks at him and asks a simple question out loud for everyone else to hear. Do you want to get healed? And suddenly this man's mind begins to race. And he's asking you the same question this morning. Do you want to be made well? Did you notice the man's answer? Do you want to be made well? I ain't got nobody, ain't got no friends. That didn't answer the question. What you told me was that's why you haven't been made well. I asked you, do you want to be made well? Now, this isn't what the Bible says. I'm just saying this is what I'm thinking, right? You want to be made well? I ain't got nobody to put me in the pool. No, did you hear me? Did you hear the question I said? Because that's not a good answer for the question I gave you. And so Jesus recognizes this, and so Jesus decides to change tactics. And he realizes, okay, I see where this guy's going to go. But I honestly, I want to make an offer. I want to give him some leadership. I want to give him an opportunity. But I'm not going to beg the guy. You know, I'm not going to beg the guy to pick up his mat and walk. And so Jesus just gives him an opportunity. You see, Jesus skips any other questions. He says, do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me get in the pool when the water stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes in ahead of me. And then the Bible just says, and then Jesus said, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And so what Jesus did was, I'm done talking. If you want to be healed, get up. Pick up your mat and walk. And then the guy had a decision to make. It was in that moment that guy had to make a decision to answer the question, do you want to be made well? And if the answer was yes, he'd get up, pick up his mat, and walk. If the answer was no, he continued to sit on his mat. So Jesus says, you don't want to answer the question? I'm going to ask it one more time, but in a different way. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And I wonder if that's not the way Jesus interacts with us most often. Where he tries to have a question, he tries to have a conversation with us, he tries to reason with us, say, hey, let's walk through this a little bit. But at the end of the day, he sees us before we saw him in our brokenness and oftentimes in our loneliness created by our brokenness. And he walks over and he says, hey, I got a plan. Would you like to be made well? And we're like, well, we can't really do that because here's my laundry list of excuses. And then Jesus just says, all right, okay, that's fine. I'm going to actually give you the choice. Not the choice to have a conversation. I'm going to give you the choice to actually be made well. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Choice is yours. You might be thinking, well, hold on, how does that happen? How is that possible that that's the choice that's made or that we were given to make when Jesus has this conversation with us? Well, I think that's what he's trying to say. He's just trying to say, get up and walk. And I'm like, well, how is he saying get up and walk? How is he saying that to me? I don't hear him saying it. Here it is. You want to get up and walk? Go to a counselor. You want to get up and walk? Go to a counselor. He's saying, I see you in your brokenness. I see you in the loneliness created by your brokenness. Here's the deal. Wounds need attention. Go see a counselor. And for those of you who are guys in the room, let me talk to you directly for a second. A lot of times we get our scratches and scars, and we enjoy letting other people see them because it just makes us feel better about ourselves. Like, hey, this is what I've been through. And we enjoy our wounds being on display. And we convince ourselves, no, I don't want to pay no attention to that. Let me tell you what a couple wise people shared with me. You better clean that up, or it's going to get infected. So get up and walk. Go see a counselor. Say, I got a couple wounds it's getting infected, and these wounds have infected more than just the area or the site of damage. It's kind of gotten in here and gotten in here, and I just need to pay some attention to those things. You want to get up and walk? Be the first to apologize. Even when you haven't done as much wrong. Be the first to apologize. You want to get up and walk? Set a date to quit. And invite someone to hold you accountable. Well, Matt here decided 2 days ago. 2 days quitting. And that girl to his left there, Carly, she's got his permission to bust his tail. Ain't that right? You want to get up and walk? Move back into the bedroom you moved out of. That's probably going to require a conversation or 10. But it's time. You're not supposed to be in the guest bedroom in a house where you're married. It's time to move back in. You want to get up and walk? Open a savings account and start putting away the money you're throwing away on nonsense. Maybe identify someone you deeply care about. Maybe it's a kid. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's just a good friend. And you're just going to make a goal. I'm going to save up and do something significant for them. You could take a year's worth of nonsense and make a lifetime of impact with something thoughtful. You want to get up and walk? Plan a vacation you can actually afford with your family this summer. Don't go and put everything on credit so you can have a week's worth of fun. So this fall is just filled with conversations about how you can't do anything or spend anything anywhere, and it's just conversation, button heads after button heads after button heads, because you had 4 days of great fun and 4 months of misery because you got to pay it back off. In other words, you're sitting on a mat that you continue to be on in your life, whatever the circumstance is. And Jesus is saying, hey, here's the deal. Do you want to get well? Then get up and walk. Do you want to stop having these financial decisions? Well, you got to figure out how to then rework how to make your finances work. Which means you might need to talk to somebody about that. You want to stop having this short temper and this teeny tiny little fuse that as soon as anything doesn't go your way, you just explode? Do something about it. Go talk to someone and say, hey, this is my issue. This is my deal. You can look at me the wrong way and I'll backhand you. Yeah. Then get up and walk. Don't give me your excuse about, well, you see, I just don't have anybody to. No, just get up and walk. You want to get up and walk? Tell work they can't have any more of your family time. They get what they get. And all the extras and bonuses and all that extra stuff they try to pull from you. Say, no. No. Because the paycheck might add up now. But when I know I'm in my last couple of weeks on earth, your paycheck won't be worth toilet paper to me. But the time with my family that I missed out on, in that moment, I would give anything to have it back. So get up and walk. You want to get up and walk? You want to be made well? Have the courage as an adult to say, I haven't gotten it right. And today, I want to give my entire life to Jesus. And if you ain't got the courage to give your entire life to Jesus today, maybe just start the conversation. Maybe just begin the conversation. Here at Foundation, we try to make this as simple as possible. And we know that most conversations in our world begin with an email or a text message, and so that's the way we like to begin this conversation. So we'll throw a number up on the screen, and we believe that when you decide to give your entire life to Jesus, one of the very first thing that happens is baptism. And so if that's you, and you're like, hey, I just want to have a conversation. It's not saying, hey, this is what I want to do. I've got some questions that I need answered. Maybe I just want to have a discussion and see kind of what all this entails. And text baptism to the number on the screen. And I want to encourage you to take a screenshot real quick, because maybe it's not this morning you want to start the conversation. Maybe it's Wednesday. Any day's a good day to start a conversation about giving your entire life to Jesus. I'll be on the other end of that text message. And we'll begin to chat. And maybe that text message chat will turn into a phone conversation. Maybe that phone conversation will turn into coffee, or I don't drink coffee. Well, if you drink coffee, we can do that. Whatever it turns into, and maybe it actually turns into you making a decision to get up off your mat and walk. You know, something pretty interesting. Jesus tells the guy, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Do you notice that Jesus says, I want you to pick up the mat? And suddenly I'm reading it, I'm like, did Jesus turn into like Miss Doubtfire? Is that what happened? Hey, clean up. And that's not a good Miss Doubtfire. Sorry. That's bad. That's real bad. Sorry, Robin. That was bad too. Dang. I gotta stop. But all of a sudden, right? Jesus is like, hey, let's tidy this mess up. Jesus ain't doing that though. Jesus is saying, hey, I want to make sure that every single person that's been watching you sit here in this mess of a mat for 38 years watches you stand up, roll it up, stick it under your arm, and walk out with it. In other words, what used to confine you, hold you, keep you hostage, keep you captured, your boundaries, the mess that you sat in for 38 years, I want you to show everyone else that when you follow the call that I put on your life, you take what was your mess and you put it under your arm and say, hey, I'm going to use my mess that's in my past as a point to purpose in my future. And I'm going to let everybody else know I'm not ashamed of the mess and the mat that I sat in, because that's the way it was. But then Jesus showed up and he asked me this question, do I want to get well? And I didn't have a really good answer. All I had was excuses. And so then Jesus says, you know what? Enough about this talking thing. Let me give you an action step. Did you see that the guy wasn't actually, Jesus didn't say, and now you're healed. He gives him the excuse. Do you want to be healed? I got an excuse. And Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And the decision's on him. Decision's on you. Jesus is saying, hey, you know probably right now what your next step is. For this guy, it was get up. You know what your get up is. And then Jesus says, here's the cool thing. If you'll do it, I'm going to give you the power to roll up your mat and stick it under your arm and own it. And walk out of there like a boss, saying, hey, this used to confine me, but now I own this thing. It's a part of my past, and I'll use it as purpose for my future. And then you know what, everybody else around town, they're going to see the guy, and they're like, is that the guy? Yeah, he's carrying the mat. How did he get off that mat? I haven't seen that guy move for 38 years from that mat. Like, that's the mat, right? Like, that's the mat. And the guy's just going to look at him and say, yeah, I decided I wanted to get well. And it just so happens Jesus is a healer. And he looked at me and said, get up, pick up my mat, and walk. So here I am. If you're a follower of Jesus and you're watching online or in the room, I hope that you recognize the weight of you being the delivery system for this message to those in your life who are still sitting on their mat. Because the truth is, there was a switch right after this story. Just a year or so, 2 years after this story, Jesus and God made a switch in how they interacted with people. You see, at this point in time, Jesus was walking around amongst everyone. And so he could literally walk up to someone and say, pick up your mat, walk. And then a couple years later, that switch happened, and God and Jesus made a decision to send the Holy Spirit to live in followers of Jesus. And so now followers of Jesus have the opportunity to walk into other people's lives. And you know it because you already know the people that are broken and sitting in their loneliness in your life. And you can see their faces right now. And you can see their brokenness even before they see you coming, can't you? You know it, and maybe they don't even know they're in brokenness. They just feel like, hey, this mat is where I've been for 38 years, and this is just the way life is going to be. And you can see that that's not supposed to be the way life is supposed to be. But because the Holy Spirit is a part of your life, you're the delivery system. You walk into the moment. You walk into the moment, and you get an opportunity to look at them and say, hey, get up. Pick up your mat. Walk. I don't know what that's going to look like for you. And I wouldn't advise you to walk in to your friend's house this afternoon and say, hey, get up. They're going to be lost. But maybe it's in an invite to the Good Friday event where we talk about why religion is so heavy, and it shouldn't be. But it makes sense because people like you and me are the ones that created it. So of course what we make is too heavy. And Jesus says, I don't want a religion with you. I want a relationship with you. And you can kick the religion to the curb. And maybe they need to hear that message. So Good Friday is where they ought to be. Or maybe it's Easter Sunday morning. One of the 2 Sundays a year that people who are far from God will say yes to an invitation more than any other. And you know who they are. And that could just be the small invitation they need to get up, pick up their mat, and walk. Who is Jesus? Jesus is a healer. No matter what we teach